Thank you everyone so much for coming. My name is Caitlin Beatty. I'm with Kirkwood Corporate Training. And today I am so excited to introduce Lisa Even. She's here with us just to share her experience, her expertise with building culture to have good ripple effect. So for those of you who are not familiar with Lisa, she's a joy connoisseur, proven in many ways, but specifically with one example, she uses a joy calendar with her husband. She describes her greatest and hardest job as being a mom. And in her spare time, you can find her gardening, swimming, bike riding, or doing yoga, which she claims she doesn't do very well. Lisa believes and often says that she has so much hope for the world. Ripples of goodness are everywhere. You just have to be looking for them. So today's session is a shortened version of what Lisa will be presenting during our 2022-2023 FIT series, which stands for Flexible and Innovative Training. That session topic will be the same, building culture to have good ripple effect. If your business is part of the FIT program, please reach out to your contact to get your seat confirmed. Or if after today you want to inquire on joining FIT or bringing Lisa into your organization, you can reach out to Kirkwood Corporate Training. So now let's get to why you're joining us today. Lisa, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. Well, good morning. And for some of you, if you're not in the Midwest, like Paula, welcome. Maybe it's good afternoon. I'm going to share my screen. So give me just a minute while I'm getting that going. Can everyone see it? I'm hoping that you can see what's on the screen. Today, I always just mention a couple of things because if I don't do it, then at the end, I'm like, oh, I should have said it. I'll tell you a little bit about me, but first, know that we are going to use the chat feature. So make sure that you have that open. The second thing is I always encourage people to have a scratch piece of paper or be able to type nearby. I'm going to ask you to be thinking about some things and jotting some things down. And so it's just helpful to have that ready. Now, in 30 minutes, sometimes it's so hard for me because I want to give you everything, but today is just a taste. I often say, leadership is a lot about grabbing breadcrumbs and being like, I'll put that in my backpack for later. And so today I'm going to share some stories, some tactics, and hopefully what you would consider some breadcrumbs that you can take back to your teams and use them. When we think about building culture this morning on this webinar, even though I can't see you, we are building our own culture. And in order to do that, I always say you need to know, like, and trust each other just a little bit. And so I'm going to give you a taste of Lisa, and that's what's on the screen right here. I'm going to give you just some these are things about my world. And hopefully somewhere in there, you're like, I relate to that. So I'm going to start in the bottom left, have good ripple effect. It's my business tagline. And I grew up in corporate America leading teams. And I often said it to those in my team. Is that good ripple effect? Like if we were to think bigger and broader, are we really bringing bigger and better ripple effect to the world? In the bottom middle, this is R&R Cafe in Independence, Iowa. It's where I grew up. You can see it's really narrow. And I grew up waitressing and serving breakfast and coffee to farmers, truckers, locals. And if you just imagine me with two big, huge coffee pots as a 14-year-old being like, Lloyd, scoot in. I always say that this is where I learned a lot of my communication skills, whether it was negotiation, influence, even sometimes making someone's day brighter. It all started in this first work experience. If you've worked in the service industry, you know. In the bottom right, we have the Green Bay Packer sign and Iowa Hawks. My husband and I love watching Hawkeye football, especially. And we spent about 10 years in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We moved up there. And then recently, a couple years ago, moved back to Iowa. So we have this Wisconsin, Iowa love for both states. In the top middle, I'm skipping a picture. These are my two kiddos. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. She turned 8 this week. And they're the joys of my life. When I think about the things that I do in the world, most of it ties right back there to them. Now, the boots my daughter's wearing, we had a pretty good argument about wearing frozen boots in family photos. And finally, I thought, Just wear the boots. Life is too short. In the top right is a picture that my daughter actually painted when she was in kindergarten. She brought this home and I looked at it and I'm like, man, number one, I think you might be an artist. But number two, it reminded me of life, right? A little bit colorful, a little bit messy. And depending on which way you turn it, you see a different thing, right? You experiencing something different. In the top left, I always say, I choose joy. One of my favorite lines to use with my teams and even with myself is that you happen to the world doesn't happen to you. And so I often decide that, you know what, this situation might not be what I really hoped it would be, but I'm going to choose joy. And my husband and I actually about 8 years ago started our own joy calendars because we schedule everything, work, meetings, oil changes, kids sports. I'm like, why can't we schedule our joy? And so that's what we do. I actually spend time out in the world talking with teams about workplace and home joy, and actually put together some challenges and a joy calendar. We won't get into that too much today, but if you don't have a joy calendar, you need one. The last two photos are really, this is a public museum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's a beautiful museum. It's one of the places that I find most joyful. And then the last photo is the Michelin star. My husband and I, as part of our joy calendar, go all over the world on the hunt for Michelin star restaurants. And side note, Michelin star doesn't mean expensive, actually. There are about 200 in the US and about 20 of them, 10 to 20 are in Vegas. So I encourage you, if you ever get an opportunity, go to one because the experience is unmatched. I often work with teams on, are you creating Michelin star experiences for your team? Things that are memorable, that taste good, right? Like if you remember back, you're like, oh, yeah, that was good. That are productive, right? And they're flavorful. Now, I hope somewhere in there you felt a connection to me. It's really that know, liking, and trusting that will build our culture throughout our time together. Now, I always say I am a gatherer of information. It's my number one job as a leader. So I would love to know on a scale of 1 to 10, this is where we're using the chat feature, where do you land today? 1 being like, Lisa, I am so refreshed. I'm going to give it a 1. That's how I'm feeling. Or all the way down to 10 being like, you know what, I just need a huge coffee and I need to make it through this day. So I would love for you to put in the chat, where are you at today? I am going to do the same. And I would say I'm probably in that like 6 to 7 range. Good. Thank you for folks putting it in there. We've got a few middle, a few upper. Yeah. A couple of us right in that 6 and 7 range, right? Yeah. COVID cold. Yep. Got it. Those are so helpful. When I think about if we were in a room together and we were all sitting at tables, this information is so valuable to me to know how people are feeling, right? To understand how I can interact. Sometimes I'm like, I'll bring the energy, right? And you just be there and I will help elevate us. Yeah, good. We got a couple people in the 9 and 10. We're going to lean on you. Now, as we think about culture and leadership and managing people, if I back the truck up a little bit, I managed large teams in healthcare. And back in 2016, this is a picture and I laugh because the picture lies, right? I feel like I was skinnier, it was summer, I'm holding a drink, right? I'm dressed up. And and this is my husband who also looks like Ed Sheeran, if you took a look at this picture, you would think, man, I bet she's having the time of her life. And in this moment, I truly was. However, if you dug into my work world and my personal world, there were 2 things going on. I was fumbling as a leader, number 1. And number 2, we were so busy as a family. I always say we suffer from enough syndrome where we never know what is enough, right? We're always like, what's the next thing? What's the next, thing? Once we do X, then we'll be happy. Once we do this, then we'll get to this, right? We're always setting these like more goals and more goals and more goals. And back in 2016, to be honest, I wasn't doing a great job in my personal or my home life to have good ripple effect. But I tell you what, in the 2016 arena, I spent a lot of time thinking about what my team needed and wanted. I spent a couple of years doing what everyone does, right? Watching the metrics, doing all the things like giving updates. And then I started to realize I think there's more. I think culture at its core is something different than the metrics and the numbers and doing all the like, are we organized? Do we have everything in line? Now, before I give you the answer to what I realized, I would like to know, and I would love for you to come up with a phrase or some words. What is culture? Like, what is it? If you had to describe it, and I'd love for you to put it in the chat. What is culture from a team culture standpoint? What is it? So take just a minute. This is where that scratch paper will come in handy. If you're like, ooh, I got to write this down before I put it in the chat. I would love to know, what is culture to you? Your environment, the way people feel. Good. Those are great. Inclusion. It's something you can feel when working with within an organization. That's a great one. What else? What is culture? Collective energy. Ooh, that's a good one. Thanks, Cassandra. Connectedness. I love that. Asking questions. Attitude, level of support, inclusion, your ability to trust, teamwork, environment. Yeah, those are so good. Inspiration, teamwork, drive. I love a lot of what you said in my mind, and we're going to talk about it here in a minute. I always say like culture is like an onion, right? There are so many different layers to it that if you were to open it up and start putting them to the side, you're like, yep, 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 a way of life. Ooh, that's good. With the way you value each other. Yeah, I love those. Now I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I promise I'm going to get to it. How do people want to feel? And I'm going to put in the chat the word feel. So then we can kind of see where the first question and the second question ended. They want to feel valued. Yeah, that's great. What else? Appreciated, appreciated, good. Appreciated, boom. Seen, included, appreciated, supported, seen. Yeah, valued, I love that. Accepted, useful. Ooh, that's a good one. Heard. Yeah, these are such great things that if you think about sitting in a leadership position, if you could do all these things, wouldn't we have solved world hunger? We would. Now on your sheet, you don't have to put this in the chat. This is truly just a reflection moment for you. I would love for you to jot down. You're going to rank yourself on two things. And again, don't need to put it in the chat. I would love for you to tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, how curious are you? So jot down on your sheet, right? You don't need to put it in the chat. If I would give myself a number, 1 being low, 10 being high, where are you in your curiousness? 1 to 10, jot that down on your sheet. This is just for you. The second thing I want you to jot down, and this will make sense here in a little bit, is how good are you at gathering information? And what I mean by that is, do you ask a lot of questions? Right? Because I think there's a difference between being curious and gathering information. Like, I'm curious, I like to learn, right? You might be like, yeah, I'm actually pretty high on that. But if I said to you, think of it in terms of a conversation. If you're sitting with a person or a group of people, how many questions are you asking? Right? Are you a question asker? Or are you gathering information? And so on a scale of 1 to 10, that's the second rating you're going to give yourself. Where are you in relation to gathering info? Those questions, right? Like pulling it out of people. If you scored low, right? If you're like, Lisa, I am a tough critic, I gave myself a low score, that's okay. What I would love for you to be thinking about is that culture, how people feel, and curiosity and gathering information are some of those layers, right? As you're thinking about how do I put together or work on my culture, if we backtrack it, you're going to be asking a lot of questions to gather info, right? Which means you need to be a little curious, right? Which then allows you to start thinking about people are probably going to feel seen and heard when I'm doing that, right? And then if we backtrack it even farther, they're going to feel appreciated, cohesive, part of a team, right? If I scrolled up in our chat, I could copy and paste it and be like, these are all the things. Now for me, and this is a little bit about what I want to talk about today, culture really, 3 of the layers that we're going to talk about from an onion standpoint, right? If we peeled back the layers, are that people want to feel seen and heard. So a few of you said that. They want to feel needed, included, and worth it. And that really boils down for me to three things: empathy, empowerment and ownership, and experiences. Now, if we were together for longer, I would wear my cool glasses. These are my Have Good Ripple Effect glasses. I would wear these longer, but for just a moment, I put them on to say, I often want to understand how my team is feeling and thinking. If I've got someone that I consider a tricky employee, the ones that are just like, you spend all your time working with them, right? I had a few of those. I often would say, can I try on your glasses for just a minute? I need to understand it, to see it, to know your logic, because there's probably a good reason for what you did or how you did it, right? Or even how you're acting or reacting. But I would love at a very high level, will you share with me what you're feeling, what you're thinking? One of my favorite quotes is listening brings out the reasonable. And one of the ways to do that is through empathy and those questions, right? Listening to truly understand versus listening to then respond back. The second component is really in that empowerment and ownership standpoint. I'm going to give you a couple like quick hit things that you can do to get people. We talk a lot about like accountability, empowerment, ownership, but that's a big bucket, right? If you feel useful and needed, right? You start to take ownership in a very, very different way. And then the third thing, probably stemming from my Michelin star experiences, is truly from a standpoint of, do people feel like being there is worth it? Now, if they feel seen and heard and needed, they're probably going to say yes. But I often say, well, why not have a little fun along the way? Now, if we take those and we say, okay, from a culture standpoint, right, it's all those words that you described. But Lisa, organizations are complex, right? And I'm absolutely 100% going to agree. I worked in a health system with about, at the time, we were 40,000 people in Milwaukee. And right as I moved back to Iowa about a year before, we merged. And so there were 70,000 people. And at the org level, you think about it and you're like, man, this is a big ship to move. But if I encourage you to almost think of it like a triangle, right, where the organization is at the top, the department is in the middle, right? And then if you boil it down, people have roles within that department. And at the bottom, right, it's just these individual humans saying, like, yeah, hey, I'm here. I would encourage you to think about in your ecosystem, right? What are the attitudes, norms, and beliefs that people have, right? I do some sessions around attitudes, norms, and beliefs, and thinking about attitudes being the like, hey, I show up today and this is how I'm feeling. Well, if you would describe your team as being burnt out, you might say we moved from an attitude to a norm. And after a long time, we started to believe that that's just how it is, right? It's really difficult to peel back the layers on those attitudes, norms, and beliefs, because once it's a belief, people really carry it strongly with them. And so it takes a different level of precision, right, and focus to undo that. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about how I boil this down in Lisa language to describe to my team. And one of the things that I would say to them is, guys, this is our ecosystem. We're in here, right? And I'm cupping my hands together. And I would say, do you see us? Now, my team would look at me like I was a little bit crazy. But I would say to them, this is our ecosystem to build, maintain, and protect. We do not want to let anyone onto our team who's going to pollute our waters. We want to have good ripple effect. And at the department level where I could really have some like influence, right? I would start to say to them, guys, this is what we believe in. This is who we are. Now, I would boil that down to the role level. When you think about, sometimes you have like a group of people where they're like, we're not taking lunch. We work till it's done. And you're thinking, right? There's good and bad with good work ethic, but not taking a lunch. You might have to peel back the onion, right? Attitude, norms, and beliefs at the role level as well. But at the end of the day, when people talk about culture, I ask them about their one-on-one interactions. I say, if you tinker, right, if you start working with people in those one-on-one interactions and your language at the department and the role level is really cohesive around what you are building, people start to respond. Now, I love this next picture or next slide primarily because it's got a picture of my daughter. She was adorable. And I say to folks, building culture is just like a family. When I think about my son and my daughter being very different humans, I have to treat them and meet them at different spaces and places depending on how they, one likes change, one doesn't. One's kind of my wild child, one isn't. And when I think about a blueprint, right? So let's pretend our empathy, empowerment, and experience is our blueprint for our house. People roll up, right, in their cars, and I often say, if you're building culture, you're going to need to do it at the macro level and the micro level. And if you're starting at the micro level, you need to know 3 things. And this would be a great thing to write down so you remember it. I'm going to put it in the chat. It's head, heart, and have-beens. People roll up in their car and they've got all these experiences, right? That's the suitcase. That's the like, I'm carrying all these experiences. I liked my boss. I hated my boss. I loved my team. We're changing too much, right? Like all the yummy and yucky stuff that they bring with them. You need to understand how they got to where they got to, right? Putting on their glasses. You need to understand what's in their heart. I often will ask the question, what are you dreaming to? Like if we were looking ahead a little bit, what would we see? Like, where do you want to be when you grow up? I had one woman who said to me, I wanted her to take my job. I'm like, Natasha, you could run the world. And she's like, Lisa, I just want to be a stay-at-home mom. And it was almost like a slap in the face because I was like, what? But her heart wasn't there. As soon as I knew it, I engaged with her in a different way. And then I always say the head is like, my kid got sick on the way here. I had to pick my dog up. I was taking care of my mom, right? It's almost like those attitudes that you're like, if I know their head, hearts, and have-beens, it's the key to really engaging with them in an appropriate way. So if anything, be thinking about your empathy, empowerment, and experiences, and those head, hearts, and have-beens. Now, the experience is, I always say, if you look around and a meeting should have been an email or that meeting was really boring, you have an opportunity to shake up those experiences. We won't get into that today, but I would love to chat offline if you like to talk about experiences. I also invite you to, when we think about leadership, we're often putting on many hats. The investigator and the engagement director are the 2 most important hats, right? Do you know your people? Do you know what they care about, what they value? Right? And are you creating an experience worth having? I'm going to tell you a really quick 30-second story about one of my employees named Paul. He was, every morning he would say, Lisa, I would be like, how are you, Paul? And he's like, 2 years and sunny. And I'm like, 2 years and sunny. This is back when I was like in my 20s. I'm like, what does that mean? And then I was like, oh, his retirement forecast. He had 2 years left and his outlook on his retirement app was sunny. And it was funny because he hated our company or our team potlucks. And so finally I went up to him and I said, Paul, not everybody's 2 years and sunny. Some of these young bucks, right? Some of these young folks are like 40 years and they have no idea if their outlook is sunny. I said, they need potlucks, Paul. They got a long time in the workforce. As soon as I engaged with him and gave him permission to not, like, the potlucks aren't for you, Paul. It was so funny because the next potluck was the first potluck that he actually brought something to. And I was like, Paul, I thought you didn't do potlucks. He goes, oh, well, these young folks, they got a long time to work. And I was like, that's right, they do. So I encourage you to be thinking about, are you gathering your information from folks? And are you creating experiences, right? Engagement opportunities for people to bop in and bop out at their leisure. Now, I fast forward our story to 2018. I had a flood in my clinic. I was managing a team, so that's the left picture. And then that evening, our family had a big house fire. We were all safe. And it was really interesting because in that moment, if you look at these pictures, all of a sudden, I was a different human, right? When you think about having a fire, all of a sudden, my goals shifted, right? My outlook on life shifted, and we ended up moving our family back to Iowa because of it, because I truly was like, man, life is short. Now, I encourage you to be thinking about who are your people, those head, hearts, and have-beens, but also be along with them on their goals and values and how that shifts. Now, I want you to walk away with this. I'm going to give you, this is the main part, and I'm going to give you one more little nugget. But I want you to be thinking about, people come with life, right? They've had experiences, they perceive the world. It's your job to really understand, right? To investigate how they're feeling, what they want, and what they value. It's also your job on the second front, and this is really where I would encourage you to be thinking about, How are people describing their culture, right? I said at the family level, the one-on-one level, your job is to investigate. At the org level, when you think about, do I actually have a way that I describe our culture? For me, it was cupping my hands and ecosystem. Your job, I encourage you, is to build some language, those key phrases. After about 3 years, when my people started to repeat back to me, don't let people pollute the waters, I was like, yes, they get it. But I was really clear on my approach. This is what I believe in. This is how our team feels. And I would say it out loud. That's the key. Meanwhile, I'm building in experiences like potlucks and holiday bingo via email and all these fun things that make people feel worth it. And the last thing that I would do, and I would show them this next slide on onboarding, and I would say, welcome to the team. You have more power than you ever know. Your ability, this is the circle of control. Your amount of control for your mood, your behavior, your reactions, you have so much power on this team. I want you to have good ripple effect. When it comes to how you show up on this team, I want you to show up and shine. And I would show them that this is what you can control. The second circle is what you can influence. And the third circle is really what you can be concerned with, but you're not going to have as much power. So start in the center. Own your ripple, because there's so much opportunity for you to evaluate the experiences you're having, contribute to them, and enhance them. Now, I wish we had more time, right? We're almost done. But if I fast forward the story, right? I shared a little bit about my journey. I now own my own leadership development company, and I go around and teach people things like, you happen to the world, not the other way around. You happen to your team, not the other way around. I encourage you, if you're thinking about your ripple effect and how you're contributing to the world, man, the world is your oyster. Now, the funny thing is, I have just a couple slides left. You're going to start to do things differently on your team, and one of two things is going to happen. Number one, this is a photo of me. I got my hair done. I called my husband. I was in Milwaukee, and I'm like, how do I look? And he goes, it's sunny there today. And I was like, I got my hair done. He didn't notice. And immediately I'm like, I am working so hard and they don't even notice, right? It's okay to actually say to them, hey, I would love to work on our culture. I noticed that lately we're not in a good spot. And so therefore, in the middle picture, I want to take a big time out. I want to give us an opportunity to reset. That's the Iowa Penn State game where we stormed the field. You might have to say to them, hey, I'm taking a time out, like I get it. And then I always say, start today. This is a picture of my grandpa. He's 92. We just moved him into an assisted living facility. And I always say, for a bit of urgency, think of my grandpa, Bill. Do it today. Life is really short. He talks about his career in such a way. It's just inspiring. Now, I encourage you, be visible with the culture that you're creating. I give out these cards. The world is lucky to have you. There's probably an opportunity for you to do that in your real world. Now, I hope I gave you all the breadcrumbs, right? And I hope I'm leaving you with some powerful messages of be an investigator, right? Develop an approach and empower and encourage. I would love to talk with you more. You can always reach out to me or to the Kirkwood training team. This is my information. I'll put it in the chat. And Corey, welcome back. I'm going to put my email and I will pass it over to you all to close us out. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You are so wonderful. I love all of your messages. You've given us so many good nuggets. I will say I loved your quote, listening brings out the reasonable. And the 3 H's, head, heart, have been so good. Thank you so much. As we are wrapping up, everybody, it would be a great time if you have any questions, go ahead and plug those in the chat.
Yeah.
I can go ahead and read those out loud if we have any. I know we have a little bit of time left. Otherwise, I did want to just say thank you all for coming today. I really hope everyone has some good nuggets they can take away. If you would please stay on for just another minute, I do have a 3-question poll that I'll go ahead and launch here now. I don't show any questions in the chat, so I'm going to give Lisa a big thank you again for your time today and all of the good nuggets you gave us again. And I am launching the poll now for everyone else.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. And I'll stay tuned.
Thanks, Lisa.
Make sure and email me questions, and I look forward to connecting with folks in the future.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Will do.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lisa.